Welcome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christine Goodfellow. I'm the academic program manager here at Gresham College. And I'd like to welcome you all who braved the cold to get into the hall. We've got a full house. I think there's people sitting downstairs as well. So thank you very much for coming. A few housekeeping notes. Those of you who've been here before, you know the drill. If there's a fire alarm, it's for real. Please use any of the two doors in the back and go outside, and the team will help you find the meeting point. After the lecture, we'll have a Q&A. You can either in the hall raise your hand, or you can scan the QR codes to the side and ask questions. We'll try to keep it even between online questions and questions in the hall. And we'll see how much time we've got for questions afterwards. I'd also like to take the opportunity to all of you who've been very generous in your donations for our Christmas fundraising appeal. So those of you in the hall, you would have seen the flyers on the chairs. Any donation, small or big, is very much appreciated and helps us with our work here. So thank you very much. But let me introduce a man who doesn't really need an introduction, Professor Ronald Hutton. He is the Professor of History at the University of Bristol. We don't do the first, like in the first one, where you know, I'll keep it short. A fellow of the British Academy, a fellow of the Royal Historical Society, a fellow of the Society of Antiquaries, and of the Learned Society of Wales. And I'm going to hand over to him to give the second lecture in his Dodgy Deities series on Hecate. So please welcome Professor Ronald Hutton.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My apologies for remaining seated for this. I just had a knee repaired, and the medics have allowed me to come here on condition I don't stand around for too long. Second, a note on pronunciation, that the lady I'm talking about tonight comes to us through the ancient Greeks, who probably pronounced her Hecate, which nobody speaks of these days. So there's a range of possible pronunciations. Hecate, Hecate, even Shakespeare's Hecate is okay. So when it comes to pronunciation, relax. More interesting, she is a goddess with a biography. Some ancient deities essentially have no biographies. In other words, what you see of them at the end of the ancient world is what you see when they first emerge into history. Others do undergo some significant development, but it ends pretty soon, and little can be said of it, said that it took place early. But Hecate belongs to a third category of goddesses and gods who underwent a long sequence of changes which turned them into the deities whom we think we know today, and whom we can follow through each stage of the development. In her origins, she isn't Greek at all. She comes into history as the dominant goddess of Caria, a district in southwestern Asia Minor, modern Turkey. As such, she presided over life and death in general, and the forces associated with them, such as fertility, prosperity, military might, and the human passions, and acted as a general protecting figure. As such, also, she's a not unfamiliar sort of goddess in the ancient Near East, really being the Carian equivalent of Cybele or Cybele in Lycia, Artemis in Lydia, Aphrodite in Cyprus, Astarte in Syria, Ishtar in Mesopotamia, Inanna in Sumeria, and so forth. Her great temple was at Lagina, where, like Cybele, she was said to be served by eunuch priests. Some of these very powerful and aggressive goddesses were regarded as only to be safely approached by men who had lost their manhood. Greeks thickly settled the coast of Asia Minor in the 9th and 8th centuries BC or BCE and came into contact with the native deities. Their mythology, in some respects, represents an attempt to assimilate these exotic beings into their own religious world. One of the earliest and most famous attempts to do this was by the poet Hesiod, round about the year 700 BCE. He brought her into the Greek divine family by calling her a sky goddess associated with both the sun and the moon. He told how the supreme god, Zeus, was so impressed by Hecate's heavenly powers that he respected her above all other deities. The Greek goddesses and gods therefore gave her the most unusual right to operate in every realm of the world: sky, earth, ocean, and underworld. Of all the other deities, only Hermes had this privilege, the divine messenger. The goddess's name is, naturally enough, Carian, a language which died out in ancient times and which we do not now understand. So we don't know what her name means. It was superficially similar, however, to the Greek word hecaton, meaning 100. Accordingly, by Hesiod's time, she had already become the patron goddess of millionaires, or would-be millionaires. Anybody who wants to get rich quickly invoked Hecate, as did people who wish for success and prosperity in any other area of life. This was one carryover, after all, from her original role as a local great goddess. Hesiod also credited her with a special care for travellers. This was a spin-off role from her remarkable ability to voyage between worlds. As such, she became the goddess who guarded roads and gateways, again the female counterpart to Hermes. Early Greek images of her often show her carrying a key, as the deity who unlocks routes into and out of places. One of her titles was Lady of the Ways. As the guardian of places in between, by Hesiod's time, she was also the goddess of dawn and dusk, Our Lady of the Twilight. Once more, a coincidence in her name aided another association. It sounds like the female form of Hekatos, far shooting in Greek, which was one of the traditional Greek titles given to the god Apollo. This made some Greeks associate her with Apollo's sister, Artemis, the goddess of wild animals and places, who was, as the mistress of beasts, given a special prominence at night when so many of them came out. They therefore placed a special emphasis on her light as being that of the moon. The two images of Artemis and of Hecate as prosperity goddess came together further in the 6th century, 100 or 200 years after the time of Hesiod. Hecate became associated particularly with abundance of natural things, such as game animals, fruit, and fish. Her standard image turned into that of a young woman carrying a torch in each hand, with hounds running beside her, which was taken from the imagery of Artemis. The archaic Greek figure of the goddess was therefore generally benevolent, but there was already another aspect to it, although still downplayed. Deities who protected their followers had, in the logic of things, to be prepared to combat the enemies of those humans. In this respect, Hecate was especially potent because, as giver of prosperity, she was in an excellent position to take it away. The Archaic Age ended around 500 BCE, and Greece entered its classical era. the one of the famous plays, temples, philosophers, and sculptors, and the cultural dominance of Athens. It was the Athenians, in the course of the 5th century, who made another great development in the image of the goddess. This was to portray her as triple, having 3 bodies backed up around a pillar and looking out in all directions. The first of these was set up at the gateway to the citadel of Athens, the Acropolis, to honour her role as guardian of doorways. Soon, however, most of the wealthier houses in the city possessed a small copy to protect the inhabitants from external dangers. Almost certainly, these 3 forms referred to the 3 levels of existence, heaven, earth, and underworld, in which she was equally at home. They rapidly, however, blended with another of her earlier aspects, as goddess of travellers, to make crossroads sacred to her. Crossroads became shrines to Hecate in themselves, with masks hung at each of the outgoing ways as symbols of her. They were already regarded as uncanny places, full of danger and promise, where spirits were likely to gather and ghosts to linger. The Athenians came, therefore, to dedicate the dark of the moon to her, as a time especially associated with the dead. Each household in Athens was ritually purified once a month at this time, with gifts of food and drink laid out for the household spirits. It now became the custom to clear away these offerings at the end of the rite and leave them at a crossroads at the dark of the moon as a dedication to Hecate, the Hecateia, or Hecate's supper. By the late 5th century, the snowballing attributes, the underworld, the dead, the crossroads, were starting to give her a new reputation as a patroness of magic. To the Greeks, magic, magia, was inherently sinister. It was something that bad and daring people did to subvert the natural order of things and to acquire divine powers for themselves. From this time on, her image and carvings changed once more. She remained a young woman followed by hounds and carrying torches. Now, however, she had flashing eyes, snakes for hair, a crown of oak leaves, and a retinue of infernal spirits and the restless dead. Here is the literary equivalent of those artistic representations, a fragment from a lost play by a great Athenian playwright, Sophocles. It is spoken by a group of women cutting roots for use in magical potions at a crossroads. O sun, you lord of light, and you, sacred fire of Hecate, invoked beside beaten paths, her radiant darts fly in multitudes through Olympus. She appears on earth in sacred spaces where 3 roads meet, her head crowned with oak and many coils of serpents on her shoulders. By the 4th century, it was believed that magicians called up restless and evil or immoral spirits and ghosts to do their bidding, and that to do so they had to win the permission of their mistress, Hecate. She retained some of her earlier benevolent aspects as guide of travellers through the night and finder of lost things, but her association with the dark and the uncanny was now becoming overpowering. In this, she became more and more merged with the figure of Artemis as a night goddess, and her ancient celestial aspect became more clearly that of a moon deity. She took over some of the actual rites of Artemis by the Roman period, such as the offering to her at the full moon of small round cakes surrounded by candles. The Greeks had long regarded the moon itself as a goddess, Selene, but like the divine spirit of the sun, Helios, not as a deity that had any interest in humans. There was no cult of Selene and were no temples to her. Now, Hecate became regarded throughout the Roman Empire as both a deity with whom people could deal, as she'd always been, and the animating spirit of the moon. Her triple form, which had symbolized the three levels of the cosmos, and then the crossroads, now became associated as well with the three visible faces of the lunar cycle. As a result of this new association and of the mingling of peoples across the empire, by the 3rd century of the Christian or Common Era, AD, CE, poets and literary scholars were starting to use the names Selene, Hecate, Diana, the Roman name for Artemis, and Luna, the Roman name for the moon, interchangeably. By the 4th century, Persephone was starting to be confused with them as the underworld aspect of this composite goddess. Here is the scholar Servius, writing in a commentary on the most famous of all Roman poems, the Aeneid of Virgil, probably around the year 400 AD or CE. Some people are in the habit of saying that Hecate is the same as Diana and Persephone, and that she has three faces, Luna, Diana, and Persephone. When Hecate is above the earth, she is supposed to be Luna. When on earth, Diana. When below the earth, Persephone. Thus, these people agree on the triple version because the moon has three forms, new, full, and old. This passage of Servius, filtered through Victorian and Edwardian scholars, was to have an immense influence upon modern occultists and pagans. It helped inspire Robert Graves to develop his image of the great goddess as maiden, mother, and crone, corresponding to the three visible phases of the moon. It also reappears, somewhat garbled but still very majestic, in the writings of the 20th century occult novelist Dion Fortune. The full moon rises high and clear. Hear the invoking words. Hear and appear. Shaddai El Chai, Rhea Bina Gi. Isis above, on earth Persephone, Diana of the ways, and three-formed Hecate. Her new identity as a composite goddess of moonlight and mystery gave new strength to those of her older associations, which marked her as one of night and magic. Dogs remained her most constant companions, with the added reason that they howled at the moon, which was now her symbol, praising her. She also, however, acquired weasels, bold nocturnal hunters, as additional favourite animals. Never underestimate weasels. They're very fast, intelligent, and brave. Her special tree remains the black poplar. This has unusually deep roots, and the Greeks believed that they went right down to the underworld, and so linked the terrestrial world with that, even as Hecate herself did. So you could whisper messages to the leaves of the black poplar, and they would be taken to the world of the dead. Highly skilled magicians claim to be more than her match, although admittedly they tend to appear only in works of fiction. A novel by Lucian of Samosata, probably written in the 170s, has a character who claimed to have met Hecate in a wood at night. As well as other terrifying attributes, she had a single leg like a pillar. He was armed with a magical ring, which he turned into the palm of his hand, so that the power in its stone flowed through him. Seeing that, Hecate just gave up, stamping on the ground with her single foot so that it opened and swallowed her up. Lucian's a satirist, okay? This is what we expect from him. And he makes it clear that readers are not expected to believe a word of this. He returned to the subject of the goddess in a short story, another satire, about a Hyperborean magician who was likewise being sent up grandly by Lucian. The cause of the mighty invocation is simply that a young man, Glaucus, has got the hots for an attractive wife of a neighbour, a woman called Chrysis. It's no more dignified than that. The lovelorn, to put it politely, young man, therefore hired the Hyperborean magician. I should explain that no Greeks or Romans actually knew where Hyperborea was, except it's somewhere way north. After a brisk haggle, an undignified one, over the precise payment for the man's services, the following drama followed, narrated by Glaucus's tutor, who'd originally had the idea of using magic to solve the problem of the young man's lust. The magician waited for the moon to start waxing, for this is the time at which rites of this kind are usually performed. Then he dug a pit in the court within the house, and around midnight he called up for us the father of Glaucus, who died 7 months earlier. The old man was angry that his son was lusting after a married woman and lost his temper. But in the end, he gave his son permission to pursue the affair with an ill grace. After that, the magician called up Hecate, and she brought Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the underworld. Then the magus drew down the moon. It showed itself in a variety of guises, with constant changes of appearance. First, it came in the form of a woman, next, a magnificent ox, and then as a puppy. Eventually, the Hyperborean made a doll out of clay and said to it, "Off you go and bring Chrysis." The doll flew out of the window, and soon there she was, knocking on the door. She came in and embraced Glaucus as if completely insane with passion, and they made love until we heard the cocks crowing. Then the moon flew back up into the heavens, Hecate dived back down beneath the earth, and the other manifestations disappeared. We sent Chrysis home round about dawn. The rite of drawing down the moon was a favourite one of fictional Greek and Roman magicians and witches. It consisted exactly as you have heard here, of literally bringing the moon down out of the sky to earth. The name has passed into the modern pagan religion of Wicca as its most important and definitive rite, but there it means something completely different, the invocation of a goddess into a human being who can then speak as the deity. This is also ancient, but it occurs in a completely different body of texts, the Greek magical papyri. These date from the late Roman period and were found in the Nile Valley in the 19th century. They contain, among much else, the most powerful and remarkable invocation to Hecate actually made to be used by real working magicians. We can hear it now, and in doing so, perhaps reflect on the ways in which ancient and modern perceptions of deity have remained the same, and how much they have come to differ. Come to me, beloved mistress, Three-faced Hecate, hear my call. Night's eternal ornament, bringing light to mortals. O child of morning who rides on plunging bulls. O queen who drives her chariot beside the sun and leads the graces revelling with the stars. From your tight grasp extend the threads of fate. Three-headed, you're the Furies, arming hands with flaming, smoking lamps. Serpents coil around your brow. Your rage is like the roar of bulls. Your womb is lined with scales of creeping things. Shooter of shafts, night shining, triple sounding, triple-headed, triple-voiced Hecate. Triple-pointed, triple-faced, triple-necked, the goddess of the triple ways, who holds perpetual leaping flames in triple basins. O you who haunt the triple paths and rule the changing years, lady before whom demons quake in fear and gods immortal tremble, hear my call. Lady of the many names, who bears fair offspring, bull-eyed, horned, mother of gods and of humans and of nature, mother of all things, beginning and end are you, and you alone rule all. You wear the chains of time unbreakable, and in your hands a golden scepter lies, subduer and subdued. Mighty mistress, mighty lover, chaos too is yours. Hail, goddess, come attend your praises. We burn for you this incense. Dark archer, mountain roamer, keeper of the crossroads, O never and nocturnal and infernal, goddess of the darkness, frightful one, O you who feast among the graves. Night, darkness, tempest, destiny, serpent-girded, drinker of blood, feaster upon hearts, giver of madness, giver of ecstasy, grant us our desire. In another rite, she can be followed from real ancient magic to the most powerful representation of her in Roman literature. It's composed by the poet Ovid and consists of the ceremony worked in his imagination by the Greek sorceress Medea. When the moon shone at its fullest, Medea went forth from her house, clad in flowing robes, barefoot, her hair unadorned and streaming down her shoulders, and all alone she wandered out into the deep stillness of midnight. Men, birds, and beasts were sunk in profound repose. There was no sound in the hedgerow. The leaves hung mute and motionless. The dewy air was still. Only the stars twinkled. Stretching up her arms to these, she turned around 3 times. Thrice sprinkled water caught up from a flowing stream upon her head, and thrice cried aloud. Then she knelt down upon the earth and prayed. O night, keeper of mysteries, O moon and stars, whose golden beams succeed the fires of day, you three-formed Hecate, who comes to the aid of magic, and you, O earth, who gives forth your potent herbs, you breezes and winds, you mountains, streams, and pools, spirits of the woods, powers of the dark, be with me now. In another rite, she calls underworld spirits and human ghosts, the traditional retinue of Hecate, It is, in fact, the ritual which Greeks and Romans in general believed should precede any invocation of infernal powers. There are passing references to it in texts from the 8th century BCE onwards, but Ovid provides a full account. Medea built 2 turf altars in the name of Hecate, to death and life, in a woodland glade. Then she dug 2 pits, or trenches, beside them. She next removed all her clothes, so that, in Ovid's phrase, only the heavens covered her, literally sky-clad, and poured into the pits first fresh blood, then wine, and finally milk, and made her invocation. Hecate's immemorial reputation among the Greeks as the goddess who could wander between worlds gave her a new and important role towards the end of the ancient world. This was among a small group of pagan intellectuals known to historians as Neoplatonists, and especially those who practiced theurgy. This was the Greek expression for rites intended to enable human beings to contact deities directly, and perhaps even to merge with them. The basic text of this movement, and the closest thing to a scripture among late pagan intellectuals, was the collection of writings known as the Chaldean oracles. Their origins are obscure, and it can only confidently be said that they emerged in the late 2nd century. Their meaning is enigmatic, partly because they are mystical in themselves, and partly because the full text of them was lost in the Middle Ages. They survive only in fragments quoted by later writers. What these do make clear is that Hecate was the favourite goddess of the theurgists, because her ability to travel between worlds made her an apparently perfect figure to mediate between the human and divine realms. She was for theurgists the goddess of transmission, transformation, and initiation. Hecate Satyra, Hecate the saviour. Her control of spirits enhanced this role because they could act as messengers between those 2 worlds, sent by deities or called by humans. A feature of late paganism, and you must bear in mind that we're now well over 1,000 years on from Hesiod, is that goddesses and gods began to seem more and more remote and detached from the activities of humanity. Devout people began to feel the need of intermediaries between them, and Hecate's spirits, the daimones, filled just that role. Hints at the rites concerned are found in the Chaldean oracles, and they sound quite similar to those in the magical papyri. They depend heavily on the calling of divine beings to communicate with humans, but place a heavier stress on meditation and other practices to purify the soul before the magical work. Like the magical papyri, and like much later ritual magic, they emphasize the use of particular stones, plants, types of incense, words and sounds, sympathetic to each other and used in combination for specific effects. Here are the words of Hecate herself, as spoken in the Chaldean oracles. I leave the undefiled, immense home of the supreme God, and come to the nourishing earth, at your orders and by the persuasion of your ineffable prayers, with which a mortal enjoys the charming of the spirits of the immortals. Why do you call me, the goddess Hecate, from the swift ethereal realms, by power that can even summon the divine? And it's clear you'd better have a good answer to that. The theurgist visualized Hecate as a pure and formless fire from which a voice issued, coming down from heaven to lodge in a statue or a person and deliver wisdom to her devotees. There is one record of the initiation rites into her mysteries. It was left by the biographer of the Neoplatonist sages, Eunapius, and tells of how the last pagan emperor, Julian, travelled to Ephesus in the year 360 to be initiated by the famous philosopher and theurgist there, Maximus. Eunapius recorded that at the climax of the rite, Maximus bowed before the statue of Hecate, burned a grain of incense to her, and chanted a hymn to her. Immediately, the torches in the hands of the statue spontaneously burst into flame, and she smiled at Maximus and Julian, and her body moved. Whether this was a real divine revelation or a trick provided by machinery used by Maximus and his assistants, or the result of a state of altered consciousness on the part of the onlookers, nobody can now tell. And indeed, Eunapius himself did not know. It is, however, a wonderful image. Maximus's fate was not a happy one. Julian was killed in battle only a couple of years later, leaving a Christian successor who had Maximus put to death. With the end of the ancient world, Hecate travels, along with the other ancient deities, into the world of art and literature, to reappear as an active goddess with the development of modern paganism and ritual magic. As I've suggested above, her attributes have made a major impact on those, and especially on Wicca. I, however, would like to conclude by going back into the ancient world to one of the most famous literary texts to feature Hecate, perhaps the most famous in modern times. It is special in a number of ways, one being that it's the earliest surviving piece of imaginative writing about a real human contemporary witch, as opposed to a mythical sorceress of long before. It was written in the 3rd century BCE by one of the most famous and accomplished of all Greek poets, Theocritus. He was composing for the wealthy and sophisticated society of Alexandria, a Greek city planted in Egypt, and at its time probably the largest concentration of humanity in the world. The Alexandrians invented commuting, traffic jams, and urban pollution. The poem is called the Pharmacutria, which simply means the sorceress. It is about an upper-class woman who has just been seduced and then cast off by a smooth-talking bastard of a man who may just have made a terrible mistake. I've provided the text of the magical work itself, removing the preceding section, which introduces the lady herself, who is called Symitha, and her maid, Thestylus. It also describes how she met the philanderer concerned while watching games in the city's amphitheatre. But let's cut to her reaction when she realized that she's been ditched after having been seduced. Whether you find what follows horrifying or satisfying must depend very much on one's own attitudes to magic, but also to women and men. Give me the bay leaves, Thestylus, give me the charms. Put a circlet of fine red wool around the cup. Hurry, I must work a spell to bind my lover. Oh, how he hurt me. 12 days without a word, but now I shall give him to magic. Moon, shine clearly. Listen to my song. I'll chant it low for you, and for blood-bathed Hecate, your earthly double, from whom dogs cower as she wanders through the graves. Be with me, Hecate, queen of terrors, help me now. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. First, the barley grains must be scattered in the fire, Thestilis. Do it, and as you throw them on, laughing with the joy of power in you, feel that you are scattering his bones. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. Next, I light the bay leaves. They crackle and flare. When the flame has died, no trace of ash remains. He has hurt me. So let the fire seize him, shrivel his heart, and burn along his veins. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. Now I throw on the corn husks. Nothing holds fast against you, Hecate, either on earth or beneath. The town dogs are howling. The goddess is at the crossroads. Keep us safe, Thestilis. Strike the bell. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. Listen, the night is windless. The sea lies still. Only my turmoil interrupts the calm. My love gone bad for a man who loves himself, the thief of my happiness and my good name. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. As this wax image melts to the goddess's laughter, so let my lover melt in love once more. As this bronze knife whirls with all my power, let him roll and twist in pain about my door. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. I make 3 libations, and say this 3 times, lady. May the woman or man who shares his bed miss him sooner than Theseus was missed on Naxos when heavy-haired Ariadne woke betrayed. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. I shed the fringe that he lost from his cloak and throw it in the brazier. Devil or god, I banish you, love, like a fat leech from the marshes, sucking my body and draining out my blood. Turn, magic wheel, and force my lover home. And now the noon of night is run. Now go, Thestilis. Before the dawn returns, scatter these ashes at his door, and whisper that we break him, bone by bone. How did it start? This misery. Goddess, you know the whole thing from its small beginning, scared but willful, full of foolish trust. I reached for his hand and pulled him softly down. His skin touched mine with sudden, secret warmth. Face to hot face, we murmured. There's no need to make the tale longer, goddess. What's done is done. So strange, so commonplace. A lifetime for me, a virgin, yet only a moment for him. And both were pleased. Now lucky for him if the magic binds him. If not, I'll make him beat upon death's door to be let in. The power of woman is never to be broken as long as you, O Lady Moon, shine on. Lady, farewell for now. Now turn your horses seaward, and leave me to my longing, which I shall bear as many dawns before. Goodbye, remote bright goddess. Goodbye, you stars that crowd night's silent path. That's it, folks.
Thank you very much. We've got time for questions.
We have loads of time.
We've got loads of time for questions. So those of you who are joining us online, there should be a QR code on the bottom right screen. So please feel free to submit some questions. We've got some from the online audience already.
I see a hand with it.
Yeah, I think we should start with some hands. My colleague Jeff is going to bring you the microphone. There it comes. Would you...
From what I understand, Hecate, symbolizing the Trinity, is a difference from the polarity. So the polarity, which very much it seems like is the world that we live in now, there are a spectrum and a assignment to one or the other, and Hecate, potentially, is the realization of the totality. Can you speak a little bit more towards what the significance is of the threeness, the Trinity, and everything about the three? Thank you.
That sounds good to me. It begins with the three worlds, as said, the three levels of the cosmos: heaven, earth, and underworld. And then it's transmuted to the crossroads. But then on her triple form blends into the ubiquity of three as a potent symbol in the cosmos. Not least because it's so stabilizing. If you have three legs on something, it won't fall over like a tripod. And many cultures have seen the cosmos as being on three different levels, like the Greeks, some of them more. And of course, there are three Furies, three Fates. Trinities are popular in world culture. So the beginning of Hecate as a wanderer, as a voyaging goddess between worlds, boldly going where no goddess has gone before, taps into a resonance of worldwide potency.
There's one question online, which is by Anonymous. Why do some deities remain unchanging and some morph so dramatically?
I wish I could answer that question. In a sense, the obvious answer, which may be the truth, is that ancient people found some deities in the form in which they emerge into history so strongly marked and also so precise in their functions that there was no need to change them or develop them. But deities like Hecate, largely because they came in from outside, were much more mutable, and so they could leak into all sorts of vacant spaces and provide all sorts of extra services that well-established and familiar and canonical deities did not.
Thank you. Another question maybe in the hall. Just 1 second, the microphone's coming.
You mentioned various sources, such as the Ovid, Lucian Samata, Eunampus, and Theocritus. Various sources. So is it only in these sources, so I pronounced them probably wrongly, that you hear about the invention or the creation of these gods, or is it just folklore, or how does it come about? Is it literary sources or both?
There are three different types of source from which we can reconstruct ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern religion. One is literature. The second is epigraphy, which means inscriptions used in actual worship. And the third is art, representation of deities. And where they match up, which they do strongly in the Greek and Roman worlds, in other words, you can use them all together instead of them not quite fitting, which is the problem, say, in Syria and Palestine in the ancient times, then you can get really quite a well-rounded impression of ancient religion in general and particular deities within it, and then watch them developing over time, which is what I've just done with Hecate.
Do you feel that in the ancient world that women were seen as having a stronger connection with metaphysical world and spiritual world than men?
It depends with what. On the whole, men and women tended to be fond of both tend to be fond of goddesses, but women overwhelmingly, to judge from the offerings left at shrines which have been excavated, tended to respond to goddesses rather than gods. In other words, whereas male deities were particularly worshipped by men, both sexes tended to worship goddesses. But on the whole, women preferred goddesses. And also, when you look at who actually deals in magic, you find it's both sexes. In real dedications like curse tablets, for example, of which there are lots, and in the papyri. But in theory and literature, magic that is offered for a fee by a professional tends to be the work of men, usually from Egypt or Hyperborea or somewhere other than where Greeks and Romans are. But informal secret magic is the preserve of women. In a world in which women were largely disempowered in public life and politics, magic was one of their great weapons, as in the pharmacutria, so it's particularly associated with them. And that's why goddesses of magic, particularly Hecate, tend often to be seen as women's goddesses. There was a gentleman here who's been waiting for a while.
Second. It's coming.
You got a mic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is it on? First of all, thanks for such a wonderful talk, Professor. It was brilliant. And I particularly enjoyed the quotes that you read to us as well. My question, I suppose, is around Hecate as a figure, because as I understand it, she's of Titanic descent, so she's a non-Olympian, yet she enjoys a kind of great importance to the ancient Greeks in terms of the rites of Eleusis. And I think I'm right in saying there's no major temples to her as well. And I wondered if you would comment on that, because she's in I don't know, an odd position there.
She occupies a particular space which is given to two different types of deity in ancient Greece and Rome. And number one is that she's a foreigner. She's not one of us, and yet she's terrifyingly powerful and also rather useful. And also you don't want to be on the wrong side of her. So there is this ambivalent relationship. She's not somebody with whom you want to tangle except in time of need, ad hoc, or you want to keep her at an arm's length at the door, at the crossroads. But also, she is a dodgy deity. You have homegrown Greek deities to whom there are few temples. People realize their power, but they don't want to worship them because what they stand for is so terrifying. Classic example is Ares, who is the not very bright, utterly brutal Greek god of war, because everybody engages in war sooner or later, but nobody really wants it. And the consequences of being on the losing side are horrific. So that's another category. You don't need to be a foreign deity to be parked in the way that Hecate is. Ares, you need to honor if you're actually heading into battle. That's when you acknowledge his existence. You have no option. And you acknowledge Hecate regularly as keeper of the door and the crossroads. But her realm is not yours. You don't want her past the door. You don't want her in your living space.
There's another one from the online audience, from Brittany. What kind of impact or role did Hecate have later in the medieval period in performance of magic and ritual when things became increasingly Christian?
She loses a lot of her potency in the medieval period. I mean, because Roman literature in particular, and also particularly Ovid, is so popular in the Middle Ages, everybody still knows about her. But she has walk-on parts as a kind of knight goddess and witches goddess, which is what she's doing in Ovid and the other Roman writers. Her appearance in Shakespeare's Scottish play as a witches goddess, which is really a walk-on, walk-off part, is typical of this. She really comes into her own again with the rebirth of modern magic in the late 19th century, or rather its rebirth as a group activity with long-lasting orders, and the snowballing of a modern tradition of magic that takes in rituals, groups, novels. And as I say, Servius's commentary upon her as a three-formed moon goddess is immensely influential on the three-formed goddess of modern paganism, Maiden Mother Crone.
I think we've got time for one more. Jeff, could you maybe? Thank you.
Thanks. I'm curious because, you talk about how she's this goddess that people are a bit afraid of. Do people, if you're invoking Hecate, do people think you're a bad person for doing that? Like, what's the social understanding of her as, like what Samantha is doing here doesn't seem particularly nice. What do you have to say about that?
She's definitely not nice.
But are you committing a crime by invoking her?
Well, it depends. The whole thing depends on what you're doing and for why. If what you're doing is protecting your home by baking cakes for her in candles, and then leaving the remains of your feast in her honor at her crossroads as an offering to her, this is perfectly okay. If you're carrying out a magic ritual to get vengeance on your lover, this is definitely not okay. If you are a theurgist who's invoking her to get a hotline to the gods, that could be okay, depending on your motives for doing so. So it is a spectrum, and everything depends on the reason, the intent, to speak Carlos Castaneda-ish, of the ritual you're carrying out. But if you're having a ritual to Hecate as opposed to a routine honouring of her and her powers, then you're probably heading into distinctly dodgy territory.
So as a follow-up question, who's going to chase you down if you're doing dodgy business?
Well, the penalty for engaging in dodgy magic in the Roman Empire was to be burned alive.
It's very serious.
Yeah. Serious stuff. The Romans, incidentally, were great witch hunters in the 3rd and 2nd centuries before the Christian era ever began. The Romans executed 3,000 people for witchcraft, mostly women, in one wave of trials, and 2,000 in another wave of trials, which is a bigger body count than anything achieved in Christian Europe later. So engaging in the wrong kind of magic under the Romans is a really dangerous business. And the Greeks put people to death for engaging in magic also.
The third lecture in the series is going to be on Mistress, the master of mystery. I've written it down. On the 28th of January. Would you like to give us a sneaky peek?
Yes, Mithras is the star of the ancient mystery religion par excellence, the one that has its shrines all over the Western Roman Empire, including in various places in Britain and including down the road in London, where you can have an experience of a Mithraic ritual. He is an inspiration to Freemasonry. He was Rudyard Kipling's favourite god, Kipling being a Freemason. And he is somebody about whom we know almost nothing certain. So I'm going to be looking at an incredibly famous vacuum and trying to fill it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming.